Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about the sacrum. So here we can see a pelvic girdle, right, which includes the two os coxal bones and the sacrum. Additionally, this model contains two lumbar vertebrae. Well, let's concentrate just on the sacrum. Okay? So this is an anterior view of the sacrum here. Okay? Down here, angle it a little bit, is the coccyx, which is considered a separate bone from the sacrum. Let's look at some of the features that we can see on the sacrum from this anterior view. These holes are called the sacral foramina, right? And if I could stick my pipe cleaner, or I can kind of stick my pipe cleaner in there. My pipe cleaner now is touching what's called the auricular surface of the sacrum. Auricular means ear-like, and if this was disarticulated, I could show you that this structure does indeed look like an ear. Right? The auricular surface of the sacrum articulates with the auricular surface on the ilium of the os coxal bone. So those two auricular surfaces come together and form a joint, the sacroiliac joint. Let's kind of turn this sideways, right? Covered up by this pad of cartilage, this intervertebral disc, is the top surface of what's known as the sacral promontory. The sacral promontory. Let's flip it over and look at the posterior view. These structures here and here that are articulating with the inferior articular processes of lumbar vertebra 5. These structures are the superior articular processes of the sacrum. Let me tilt it and see. You can see a little bit of the sacral promontory here. So there's that pad of cartilage again, that intervertebral disc, and some of the sacral promontory there. This is a plastic model. It's not a real sacrum. So in a real sacrum, there would be a large hole here leading to a space that goes down through the sacrum, and that's called the sacral canal. In the human body, the sacral canal contains nerves, and those nerves are going to exit the sacral canal and then run through those sacral foramina. One of the things you have to be able to do is to tell the difference between the male and the female pelvic girdle, right? So I'll tell you right now, this is a male pelvic girdle, and we can tell this by a few features. First of all, this structure here, which is called the pubic arch, it looks like an upside down V. That's true for a male. And the female, it looks like an upside down U, right? It's a little bit wider too. Looking at the pelvic girdle from the superior view, right, this structure here, the space is called the pelvic inlet. Right? And you can see these bones here protruding into the pelvic inlet. Those are called the ischial spines. So in the male, those ischial spines readily protrude into that pelvic inlet. In the female, they do not. And that's because a baby has to go through that pelvic inlet, and those ischial spines would hurt the baby if they were protruding inward. Additionally, the coccyx here is turned massively anterior in the male. Again, it would be hard for a baby to go through this pelvic inlet with this coccyx in the way. So in the female, it's more posterior. Additionally, the coccyx in the female is flexible. So the joint between the sacrum and the coccyx is much more flexible in the female pelvis than in the male. So those are some key characteristic differences between the male and the female pelvis. Now let's take a look at the os coxal bone in more detail. The os coxal bone has many names. Sometimes we just call it the hip bone. Right? Sometimes it's called the coxal bone. I already mentioned that it's called the os coxal bone. It can also be referred to as the os coxa or os coxae for plural. And I've even heard it called the innominate bone, which in Latin means the no-name bone, which is a very creative name for a bone, wouldn't you say? This is a hard bone to study, I think, because it's kind of twisted, so that can make it a little bit difficult to study. Right? So one important thing to realize about the os coxal bone is that it actually is three bones that have fused together. So when we are born, the os coxal bone is three separate bones: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. And through the process of development, even well into our adolescence and teenagehood, these bones are separate and they eventually do fuse together. So let's first take a look at the pubic bone or pubis bone. Okay, so that's right here. It's the most anterior portion of the os-coxal bone. Okay, and I guess one of the distinguishing features of the pubis is the fact that the pubis bone on the left articulates with the pubis bone at the right through a joint called the pubic symphysis. So this joint is called the pubic symphysis. Let's turn this os-coxal bone for a lateral view, right? So here is the pubic bone from the lateral view. This structure here, this is the large socket that the head of the femur will fit in, forming the hip joint. This is called the acetabulum. And if we could divide the acetabulum into 3 parts, okay, 1/3 of the acetabulum is part of the pubic bone, 1/3 is a part of the ilium, and 1/3 is a part of the ischium. Okay. This large hole right here is called the obturator foramen. Okay. So here we have the ischium. Let's take a look at that from a posterior view. Okay. So this is a posterior view. Here's the ischium, and this sort of knobby area on the ischium is called the ischial tuberosity, right? And this is your butt bone. Like literally, have you ever had anyone sit on your lap and it hurts because their butt bone is sticking into you? That's the ischial tuberosity, right? These structures here are the ischial spines. You see one here and on the other side. And that's a key distinguishing feature to identify the difference between a male and a female pelvis. The ischial spines protrude into the pelvic inlet much more so in the male than the female. This large bone right here is the ilium. Right? Now, right here where I'm sticking this pipe cleaner, there's a joint between the sacrum and the ilium. It's the iliosacral joint. And the surface of the ilium at this joint is called the auricular surface. Just like the surface of the sacrum at this joint is also called the auricular surface. Auricular means ear-like in Latin. And if you look at these when they're disarticulated, they do actually look a little bit like an external ear. Right? And those two surfaces come together to form a joint. Not a very movable joint, but a joint nonetheless. The upper portion of the ilium is called the iliac crest. Medial surface of the ilium forms a bowl or dip-like structure called the iliac fossa.